The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky outcroppings of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, nestled deep in the unforgiving mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Riley Hartwell adjusted her scope one final time, her finger hovering just millimeters from the trigger of her Barrett M98B, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. Below her, 200 Marines were walking into what they didn't know would be the deadliest ambush of the war. She had one shot, one chance to prove that the farm girl from Nebraska belonged among the elite snipers of the United States Marine Corps. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The radio crackled with static as Colonel Marcus Brennan's voice cut through the tension. Overwatch, do you have eyes on the target? Riley's heart pounded against her chest armor, but her voice remained steady as steel. Affirmative, sir. Target acquired at 1,847 meters. There was a pause that seemed to stretch for eternity before the colonel's response came back. Take the shot, Sergeant. Bring our boys home. What happened next would become legend in the halls of Quantico and change everything anyone thought they knew about precision, courage, and the deadly art of long-range warfare. Riley Hartwell had never imagined that her childhood spent hunting. Deer in the cornfields outside Omaha would one day determine the fate of an entire Marine battalion. Growing up on her grandfather's farm, she learned to shoot before she learned to drive, spending countless hours perfecting her aim with an old Remington 700 that had belonged to 3 generations of Hartwells before her grandfather, Thomas Hartwell, was a Vietnam veteran who understood the weight of a rifle and the responsibility that came with exceptional marksmanship. Every evening after chores, he would set up targets at increasingly difficult distances, teaching Riley not just how to shoot, but how to read wind patterns, calculate bullet drop, and most importantly, how to remain calm under pressure. A good shot ain't about the rifle, Riley girl, Thomas would say, his weathered hands steady as he demonstrated proper breathing techniques. It's about everything that happens before you pull that trigger. The preparation, the patience, the ability to block out everything except what matters most. Those words would echo in her mind years later as she faced the most critical shot of her military career. By the time Riley graduated high school, she could consistently hit targets at 800 yards with iron sights, a skill that caught the attention of the Marine Corps recruiter who visited her school during her senior year. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Vance had seen countless young recruits come through her office, but there was something different about the quiet girl from Nebraska, who spoke softly but carried herself with an unmistakable confidence. What makes you think you want to be a Marine? Vance had asked during their first meeting. Riley's answer was simple but profound. Because I want to protect people who can't protect themselves, and I happen to be really good with a rifle. That combination of purpose and skill would prove to be exactly what the Corps was looking for. Boot camp at Paris Island was a crucible that transformed the farm girl into a disciplined warrior, but it was during advanced marksmanship training that Riley truly began to shine. Her instructors quickly realized they were dealing with a natural talent that came along once in a generation. Staff Sergeant Kevin Morrison, a veteran sniper instructor with 2 tours in Iraq under his belt, recognized Riley's potential immediately. Most recruits struggle to hit targets consistently at 300 yards, Morrison recalled. Hartwell was putting rounds through the same hole at 500 yards, like she was threading a needle. But what impressed me most wasn't her accuracy, it was her composure. While other recruits would get rattled by pressure, she seemed to thrive on it. The path to becoming a Marine sniper is notoriously difficult, with a failure rate exceeding 70%. The Scout Sniper Basic Course at Quantico pushes candidates to their physical and mental limits, testing not just their marksmanship skills, but their ability to operate independently in hostile territory for extended periods. Riley entered the program as one of only 3 women in a class of 45 candidates. The challenges began immediately. The physical requirements were brutal. Candidates had to demonstrate proficiency in long-range reconnaissance, camouflage, and concealment, target identification, and precision shooting under extreme stress. The mental demands were equally taxing, requiring absolute focus and the ability to make life-or-death decisions in split seconds. Chief Warrant Officer David Sanderson, the lead instructor for Riley's class, had initially been skeptical about female candidates in the sniper program. His doubts weren't based on gender bias, but on the harsh realities of combat operations that often required snipers to carry equipment, weighing more than 80 pounds across difficult terrain for days at a time. "I'll be honest," Sanderson admitted. "When I first saw Hartwell's file, I wondered if she had what it took to handle the physical demands of the job." That concern lasted exactly 1 day. By the end of the first week, she was outperforming candidates who had 10 inches and 50 pounds on her. She proved that heart and determination matter more than size. The coursework was relentless. Students learned advanced ballistics, studying how factors like temperature, humidity, wind speed, and even the Coriolis effect could influence bullet trajectory at extreme distances. They mastered the art of range estimation, practiced stalking, techniques that allowed them to remain undetected while moving through enemy territory, and developed the mental discipline required to remain motionless for hours at a time. Riley excelled in every aspect of the training, but it was during the final field exercise that she truly distinguished herself. The scenario involved a simulated hostage rescue where sniper teams had to eliminate multiple targets simultaneously while protecting civilian assets. Riley's team was assigned the most difficult position, requiring a shot of over 1,200 yards through challenging wind conditions. As her spotter, Corporal Jake Wheeler, called out wind readings and range adjustments, Riley settled into her shooting position with the same calm focus she had learned from her grandfather years earlier. The target was a piece of paper the size of a dinner plate, and a miss could theoretically result in civilian casualties in the simulation. "Wind holding steady at 8 miles per hour, left to right," Wheeler whispered. "Range confirmed at 1,247 yards. Target is stationary." Riley made her final adjustments, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger with the same smooth motion she had practiced countless times in the Nebraska cornfields. The bullet found its mark with surgical precision, striking the center of the target and completing the mission objective. But what impressed her instructors most wasn't the accuracy of the shot. It was Riley's immediate transition to scanning for additional threats, and her calm communication with the command post about mission status. Upon graduation from Scout Sniper School, Riley was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, based out of 29 Palms, California. Her new unit was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, where they would be supporting Operation Enduring Freedom in some of the most dangerous territory in the country. The Marines of 3/7ths had a reputation as one of the most elite infantry units in the Corps, but they had never worked with a female sniper before. Initial reactions were mixed, with some Marines questioning whether a woman could handle the physical and emotional demands of combat operations in Afghanistan's unforgiving mountain terrain. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, the battalion commander, had reviewed Riley's training records and was confident in her abilities, but he understood the concerns of his Marines. "Integration is always challenging," Mitchell explained to his staff. "But Sergeant Hartwell earned her place here through merit, and I expect she prove herself in the field just like any other Marine." The pre-deployment training was intensive, focusing on the specific challenges they would face in Afghanistan. The terrain was unlike anything most of the Marines had experienced, jagged mountains reaching over 10,000 feet, with temperature swings of 60 degrees between day and night, and wind patterns that could change dramatically within minutes. Riley spent countless hours studying topographical maps of their area of operations, memorizing key terrain features and identifying potential sniper positions that could provide overwatch for patrol routes and forward operating bases. She worked closely with the battalion's intelligence section, learning to identify enemy tactics and understand the complex tribal dynamics that influence the security situation in their assigned sector. Her sniper partner was assigned as Corporal Marcus Chun, a veteran of 2 previous deployments who had initially been reluctant to work with an unproven female Marine. Chun's reservations weren't personal. They were based on the life-or-death nature of sniper operations, where absolute trust between partners was essential for survival. In the sniper community, your spotter isn't just a teammate, he's your lifeline, Chun explained. I needed to know that Hartwell could handle herself in a firefight, that she wouldn't freeze up when things got bad, and that she had the physical strength to carry her share of the load during extended operations. Those concerns were addressed during a grueling month-long training exercise in the Mojave Desert, where sniper teams practiced the skills they would need in Afghanistan. Rayleigh and Chun spent days at a time in observation posts, working together to identify targets, calculate firing solutions, and coordinate with ground units conducting patrols in simulated enemy territory. The exercise culminated in a scenario where their observation post came under simulated attack, requiring them to rapidly displace to alternate positions while maintaining communication with friendly forces. Riley's performance during the exercise was flawless, demonstrating not only her marksmanship skills, but her ability to think clearly under pressure and work effectively as part of a team. After that exercise, I knew I could trust her with my life, Chun later recalled. She had proven herself in every way that mattered. The fact that she was a woman became irrelevant. She was a Marine, and a damn good one. As their deployment date approached, Riley found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her from the cornfields of Nebraska to the elite ranks of Marine snipers. The girl who had learned to shoot rabbits with her grandfather's old rifle was now preparing to deploy to one of the most dangerous places on Earth, carrying a precision rifle system worth more than most people's cars, the .338 Lapua Magnum rifle. That would become her signature weapon was a marvel of engineering, capable of delivering devastating accuracy at distances exceeding 1,500 yards. The Barrett M98B system she had trained with was designed specifically for military precision shooting, featuring a match-grade barrel, adjustable stock, and advanced scope system that could compensate for a wide variety of environmental factors. But Riley understood that the rifle was just a tool. The real weapon was the Marine behind it, and the years of training, discipline, and mental preparation that went into every shot. As she packed her gear for the deployment to Afghanistan, she carried with her not just the technical skills she had learned in the corps, but the wisdom and values instilled by her grandfather on those long afternoons in the Nebraska countryside. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The final briefing before deployment painted a stark picture of what they could expect. Their area of operations included some of the most contested territory in Afghanistan, where Taliban forces had established sophisticated networks of fighters and weapons caches. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy snipers were active in the region, and several Marine units had taken casualties from long-range fire in recent months. Colonel Brennan, who would serve as their regimental commander, made it clear that the mission would test every skill they had learned and every bond they had forged as a unit. You're going to a place where the enemy knows the terrain better than we do, where they've been fighting for longer than some of you have been alive, Brennan told the assembled Marines. But you have something they don't: superior training, better equipment, and the unbreakable bond of brotherhood that makes Marines the finest fighting force in the world. As Riley boarded the transport aircraft that would carry her unit across the world to Afghanistan, she carried with her a small piece of Nebraska soil that her grandfather had given her before she left for boot camp. It was a reminder of where she came from, but more importantly, it was a symbol of the values and principles that would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The long flight gave her time to review her mission folders and study the intelligence reports about their area of operations, but mostly she found herself thinking about the Marines she would be responsible for protecting. In a few days, she would be providing overwatch for patrols and convoys, using her skills to keep her fellow Marines safe in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Riley Hartwell had come a long way from the farm girl who learned to shoot in the cornfields of Nebraska, but the core of who she was remained unchanged. She was still the same person who had told the recruiter that she wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, and now she would have the chance to do exactly that on a scale she had never imagined. The aircraft banked toward their destination, carrying Riley and her fellow Marines toward a rendezvous with history that would test everything they had learned and prove that sometimes, in the most desperate moments, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things. The helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air as Forward Operating Base Sentinel came into view, a collection of concrete barriers and prefabricated structures carved into the side of a mountain at 8,200 feet above sea level. Riley pressed her face to the small window, studying the terrain that would become her hunting ground for the next 13 months. The Kunar province of Afghanistan was known among Marines as the Valley of Death, a maze of steep ridgelines, hidden valleys, and ancient smuggling routes that had defied conquest for centuries. Soviet forces had learned this lesson the hard way in the 1980s, and now American forces were discovering that the mountains held their own deadly secrets. As the CH-53 Super Stallion touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, Riley grabbed her gear and followed her fellow Marines toward the base's reception area. The smell hit her immediately, a mixture of diesel fuel, burning trash, and something else she couldn't quite identify but would later learn was the ever-present dust that coated everything in this forsaken place. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, the base's intelligence officer, was waiting to brief the new arrivals. Rodriguez had been at Sentinel for 8 months and carried herself with the weary confidence of someone who had seen too much combat in too short a time. Her first words to the group were characteristically blunt. "Welcome to the worst neighborhood in Afghanistan. The good news is that the Taliban know you're here. The bad news is that they've been preparing a welcome party." The briefing room was sparse, dominated by a large topographical map covered in red pins indicating enemy activity and black pins marking locations where American forces had taken casualties. Rodriguez began with a sobering statistic. "In the past 6 months, we've had 37 Marines killed or wounded in this sector. 60% of those casualties came from sniper fire or improvised explosive devices triggered by observation teams." Riley studied the map intently, noting the pattern of attacks and the terrain features that provided natural concealment for enemy positions. The mountains rose to over 12,000 feet in some areas, creating countless opportunities for observers to monitor American movements and coordinate attacks on supply convoys and patrol routes. "The enemy we're facing isn't the same Taliban we fought 5 years ago," Rodriguez continued. "These are seasoned fighters who've been studying our tactics and adapting their own. They've got former Soviet equipment, weapons smuggled in from Pakistan, and most importantly, they know every cave, trail, and hiding spot in these mountains." Staff Sergeant Tony Blackwood, the senior sniper in Riley's platoon, raised his hand. "What about counter-sniper operations? Are we getting any support from higher headquarters?" Rodriguez's expression darkened. "We've lost 2 sniper teams in the past 4 months. One team was compromised during infiltration. The other walked into a coordinated ambush. The enemy knows we're using snipers, and they're actively hunting our shooters." The reality of their situation began to sink in. This wasn't going to be the sterile, controlled environment of training exercises or even the urban combat that many Marines had experienced in Iraq. This was warfare in some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth, against an enemy that had been perfecting guerrilla tactics for decades. Riley's first patrol came 2 days after arriving at Sentinel. She was assigned as overwatch for a resupply convoy heading to a smaller outpost called Firebase Thunder, located 15 miles down a winding mountain road that had been the site of numerous ambushes. Her mission was to provide security from elevated positions, while the convoy navigated the most dangerous sections of the route. Corporal Chun helped her establish a hide site on a ridge overlooking the road, approximately 1,200 feet above the valley floor. The position offered excellent visibility of potential ambush sites, but it also exposed them to observation from higher elevations where enemy spotters might be operating. "This is different from training," Chun whispered as they settled into their position before dawn. "Out here, if we get compromised, there's no reset button, no do-overs." Riley nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that came with their mission. Below them, 12 Marines and 4 vehicles would be trusting their lives to her ability to identify and neutralize threats before they could attack the convoy. The convoy began moving at 0630 hours, maintaining communication with Riley's overwatch position through encrypted radio channels. For the first hour, the movement proceeded without incident, but Riley's training had taught her to be most alert during periods of apparent calm. The enemy often waited until convoys were deep in the kill zone before initiating attacks. At 0742 hours, Riley spotted movement on a ridgeline approximately 800 meters to the east. Through her scope, she could see 2 figures carrying what appeared to be an RPG launcher, moving into position to engage the convoy as it rounded a hairpin turn in the road. The geometry was perfect for an ambush. The vehicles would be channeled into a narrow section of road with no room to maneuver. "Control, this is Overwatch," Riley transmitted. "I have 2 military-age males with RPG, Grid 41SQ, D164728, preparing to engage convoy." The response came back immediately. "Overwatch, you are cleared to engage. Protect the convoy." Riley made her adjustments for range, wind, and elevation, settling into the shooting position that had become second nature through countless hours of training. The first target was clearly visible, kneeling behind a boulder as he prepared to fire at the lead vehicle. At 847 meters, it was a challenging shot, but well within her capabilities. Her first round struck the RPG gunner center mass, dropping him instantly. The second fighter began to flee, but Riley's follow-up shot caught him before he could reach cover. The threat was neutralized, and the convoy continued its movement without taking fire. "Outstanding shooting, Overwatch," came the voice of Lieutenant Mike Sullivan, the convoy commander. "You just saved our asses." But Riley felt no satisfaction in the kills. She had crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed, transitioning from someone who had trained to take lives to someone who had actually done it. The psychological impact of that first engagement would stay with Riley for years, but there was no time for reflection. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy activity was increasing throughout their sector, with multiple units reporting contact with sophisticated and well-equipped Taliban forces. 3 weeks into the deployment, Riley found herself assigned to a mission that would test every skill she had learned as a Marine sniper. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating from a compound in the village of Zawar Kili, approximately 8 miles from Firebase Thunder. The target was reportedly a Taliban commander, responsible for coordinating attacks on American supply routes. The mission required Riley and Chun to infiltrate enemy territory, establish an observation post overlooking the village, and provide intelligence on enemy movements while supporting a helicopter assault on the compound. The insertion would be conducted at night, with the sniper team moving on foot across treacherous mountain terrain to reach their position. Major Patricia Hayes, the battalion operations officer, briefed the mission with characteristic precision. This target has been responsible for at least 12 attacks on our forces in the past 6 weeks. Intelligence indicates he's planning something big, possibly a coordinated assault on one of our forward operating bases. The infiltration began at 2,200 hours, with Riley and Chun moving carefully through rocky terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and tier equipment. Each carried nearly 70 pounds of gear, including their weapons, ammunition, communications equipment, and supplies for a 48-hour mission. The night vision goggles revealed a landscape of jagged rocks, steep drop-offs, and narrow paths that had been used by smugglers for centuries. Rayleigh's physical conditioning, honed through months of training, proved essential as they climbed nearly 2,000 feet of elevation while maintaining noise discipline and avoiding detection. By 0400 hours, they had reached their designated observation post, a cluster of boulders that provided concealment while offering clear sight lines to the target compound. Riley began setting up her rifle system while Chun established communication with the command post and began logging enemy activity in the village below. The compound was larger than intelligence reports had indicated, with multiple buildings, surrounded by high walls and what appeared to be defensive positions at key points. Through her scope, Riley could see guards moving between buildings and evidence of significant military activity. "This isn't just a safe house," Chun whispered as he studied the compound through binoculars. "This looks like a command center. There are way more people down there than we were briefed on." Riley counted at least 30 individuals moving through the compound, many carrying weapons and wearing tactical gear that suggested military training. As dawn broke over the mountains, Riley began to understand the true scope of their situation. The helicopter assault was scheduled for 0800 hours, but the intelligence picture had changed dramatically. Instead of capturing or killing a single high-value target, they were potentially facing a company-sized enemy force in prepared defensive positions. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted. "Enemy strength is significantly higher than briefed. Recommend mission abort pending further intelligence." The response came back within minutes. "Overwatch mission is a go. Provide Overwatch for helicopter assault as planned." Riley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The assault force consisted of 20 Marines and 2 helicopters, and they were about to land in what appeared to be a carefully prepared trap. Through her scope, she could see enemy fighters moving to positions that would give them clear fields of fire at the planned landing zone. At 0755 hours, the sound of approaching helicopters echoed off the mountain walls. Riley watched through her scope as the first CH-46 Sea Knight began its approach to the landing zone. Completely unaware of the reception waiting for them, the enemy opened fire as soon as the helicopter touched down, with automatic weapons and RPGs engaging from multiple positions around the compound. The helicopter took immediate hits, and Riley could see Marines diving for cover as they attempted to exit the aircraft under heavy fire. "Command, the LZ is hot," came the frantic radio call from the assault team leader. "We're taking heavy fire from prepared positions. Request immediate close air support." But the nearest attack aircraft were 30 minutes away, and the Marines on the ground didn't have 30 minutes. Riley began engaging targets of opportunity using her precision rifle to disrupt enemy positions and create opportunities for the trapped Marines to maneuver. Her first shot eliminated a machine gunner who was raking the landing zone with automatic fire, giving the assault team a brief respite from the devastating volume of fire. Chun called out targets and adjustments while maintaining communication with multiple units, the assault team, the command post, and the helicopters attempting to provide fire support. The complexity of the tactical situation required split-second decisions and perfect coordination between the sniper team and the forces they were supporting. Riley's second shot struck an RPG gunner who was preparing to engage the grounded helicopter, preventing what could have been a catastrophic hit on the aircraft with Marines still aboard. Her third shot eliminated a sniper who had been engaging the assault team from an elevated position inside the compound, but for every enemy fighter Riley eliminated, 2 more seemed to take their place. The compound was clearly a major staging area for Taliban operations, and the enemy had prepared for exactly this type of assault. The Marines on the ground were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a kill zone with minimal cover. "We need to get those Marines out of there," Riley said to Chun as she reloaded her rifle. "This was supposed to be a quick hit, but it's turning into a disaster." Chun nodded grimly as he continued calling out targets and coordinating with the command post. The helicopter assault had been based on intelligence that was either outdated or deliberately false, and now 20 Marines were fighting for their lives in the valley below while Riley and Chun provided the only long-range fire support available. The mission that was supposed to eliminate a Taliban commander had become a desperate battle for survival, with Riley's rifle the only thing standing between her fellow Marines and annihilation. As the battle intensified, Riley realized that everything she had trained for, everything she had learned about precision shooting and tactical decision-making, would be put to the ultimate test in the next few hours. The Marines trapped in the compound were counting on her, and failure wasn't an option. The radio crackled with desperate voices as the situation in the valley deteriorated by the minute. Staff Sergeant Derek Martinez, leading the trapped assault team, was calling for immediate extraction while simultaneously coordinating defensive positions for his Marines. The second helicopter had managed to abort its landing and was circling at a safe distance, its crew desperately searching for a way to help their brothers on the ground. Riley watched through her scope as Taliban reinforcements poured into the compound from hidden tunnels and concealed positions throughout the village. What had started as a surgical strike against a single target had become a full-scale battle against what appeared to be an entire Taliban battalion. The intelligence failure was complete, and 20 Marines were paying the price with their lives. "Overwatch. This is Assault Leader." Martinez's voice cut through the radio static. "We've got casualties and we're running low on ammunition. The primary LZ is completely compromised. We need alternate extraction options, over." Riley could hear the strain in his voice as automatic weapons fire echoed in the background of his transmission. Chun was already working the problem, coordinating with the helicopter crews and the Tactical Operations Center to identify alternative landing zones. But every potential site was either too small for the helicopters or dominated by enemy positions that could bring devastating fire on any aircraft attempting to land. Through her scope, Riley could see the tactical situation developing in real time. The Marines had taken cover behind a low stone wall near the compound's entrance, but enemy fire was coming from 3 sides, and their position was rapidly becoming untenable. 2 Marines were already down, and the team medic was working frantically to stabilize their wounds while under continuous fire. "I count at least 60 enemy fighters," Riley reported to Chun, who relayed the information to the command post. "They've got machine gun positions on the north and east walls of the compound, RPG teams moving to higher ground, and what looks like a mortar team setting up behind the main building." The mortar team was the most immediate threat. If they managed to get their weapon operational, they could rain indirect fire on the Marine positions with devastating effect. Riley made the tactical decision to prioritize that target, adjusting her scope for the 1,180-meter shot to the enemy position. Her bullet struck the mortar tube just as the crew was preparing to drop their first round, sending the weapon tumbling down the hillside and eliminating that particular threat. But the victory was temporary. Riley could see more enemy reinforcements arriving from the north, including what appeared to be a technical vehicle mounting a heavy machine gun. The technique was positioning itself to provide enfilading fire along the Marines' defensive line, a tactical move that would expose every American position to devastating automatic weapons fire. Riley tracked the vehicle through her scope, but it was moving quickly along a winding road, making a precision shot extremely difficult. "Chun, I need you to spot that technical," Riley called to her partner. "It's moving too fast for me to engage effectively without continuous updates." Chun immediately shifted his binoculars to track the vehicle while maintaining radio communication with multiple units. The vehicle moving east to west, approximately 900 meters, speed roughly 20 miles per hour, Chun reported. "It's following the road around the base of the hill. You'll have maybe a 3-second window when it stops to set up the machine gun." Riley calculated the lead time and trajectory, anticipating where the vehicle would stop based on the tactical geometry of the situation. The technical would need to position itself where the gunner could bring effective fire on the Marine positions, which limited their options to 2 or 3 specific locations. When the vehicle stopped at the predicted position, Riley was ready. Her shot struck the gunner before he could bring his weapon to bear, eliminating another critical threat to the trapped Marines. But the tactical situation continued to deteriorate as more enemy reinforcements arrived and the Marines' ammunition supplies dwindled. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell's voice came over the radio with an update that sent chills through both Riley and Chun. "All stations, be advised that intelligence indicates enemy reinforcements are moving toward your position from multiple directions. The estimated time of arrival is 30 minutes. We need to get our people out of there now." The helicopter crews were working frantically to identify extraction options, but the tactical reality was becoming increasingly clear. There might not be a safe way to evacuate the Marines before they were completely overrun. The enemy had prepared for exactly this scenario, and their response was coordinated and overwhelming. "Overwatch, this is Cavalry 6, came a new voice on the radio. Major Frank Richardson was the squadron commander for the helicopter unit, attempting to coordinate the extraction. "We've identified a possible LZ approximately 800 meters north of the current Marine position, but it's on the far side of that ridgeline. The Marines would have to move through open ground under fire to reach it." Riley studied the proposed extraction route through her scope, and what she saw made her heart sink. The Marines would have to cross nearly half a mile of open terrain while under observation and fire from elevated enemy positions. It would be a gauntlet that few would survive, especially while carrying wounded comrades. "Sir, that route is completely exposed," Chun transmitted. "The enemy has overlapping fields of fire covering the entire approach to that LZ. It would be suicide for the Marines to attempt that movement." But Major Richardson's response indicated that they were running out of options. "Roger. Overwatch. But it's the only LZ we can access with the birds. The primary site is too hot, and we can't risk losing aircraft with all crew aboard." As if to emphasize the point, enemy fire began impacting closer to the Marines' position, with accurate shots suggesting that Taliban snipers were beginning to zero in on the American positions. Riley could see muzzle flashes from multiple elevated positions around the compound, indicating that the enemy had positioned their own precision shooters to engage the trapped Marines. "I've got enemy sniper activity from the tower in the southeast corner of the compound," Riley reported. "Range approximately 1,100 meters. He's been taking shots at our guys for the past 5 minutes." She watched through her scope as the enemy sniper fired another round, the bullet impacting dangerously close to where Martinez was coordinating his Marines' defense. Riley made the decision to engage the enemy sniper, but the shot would be challenging. The target was partially concealed behind the stone parapet of the tower, presenting only occasional opportunities when he exposed himself to fire. The range was at the outer limits of her effective engagement envelope, and the wind conditions in the mountains were creating unpredictable bullet drift. When the enemy sniper next exposed himself, Riley was ready. Her shot struck him center mass, sending his rifle tumbling from the tower to the courtyard below. But even as she eliminated that threat, she could see other enemy positions being occupied by fighters with scoped rifles. The tactical picture was becoming increasingly clear. The Taliban had prepared a sophisticated ambush designed to trap American forces and inflict maximum casualties. The compound wasn't just a safe house or command center. It was bait in a carefully planned trap that was now closing around 20 Marines. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted with growing urgency. "The enemy is moving to isolate our Marines completely. We've got large formations moving to cut off all withdrawal routes. This was planned well in advance." Colonel Brennan's voice came over the command net with characteristic calm authority. "All stations, we are not leaving Marines behind. I don't care what it takes or what risks we have to accept. We bring every Marine home." The words were inspiring, but the tactical reality remained unchanged. The Marines in the compound were surrounded, outnumbered, and running out of ammunition. The proposed extraction route was a death trap, and enemy reinforcements were closing in from multiple directions. Riley made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. "Chun, I'm going to provide covering fire for their movement to the alternate LZ. I know the route is exposed, but if I can suppress the enemy positions along their withdrawal route, they might have a chance." Chun looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Riley, there are at least 15 enemy positions with direct fire capability along that route. You can't engage them all simultaneously, and once you start shooting, every Taliban fighter in the valley is going to know exactly where we are." Riley understood the implications. By revealing their position to provide covering fire, she and Chun would become priority targets for every enemy weapon in the area. Their concealed observation post would become a magnet for Taliban fire, and their chances of survival would drop dramatically. "I know the risks," Riley replied quietly, "but those Marines down there are counting on us. If we don't act, they're all going to die." She began identifying the enemy positions that posed the greatest threat to the Marines' withdrawal route, prioritizing targets based on their ability to bring effective fire on the exposed ground. The first position was a machine gun nest on a hilltop approximately 1,300 meters from the Marines' current position. The gun crew had positioned their weapon to provide overlapping fire with other positions, creating an interlocking pattern of automatic weapons fire that would make movement across the open ground nearly impossible. Riley's first shot eliminated the machine gunner, but his replacement immediately took over the weapon. Her second shot struck the assistant gunner, but she could see other fighters moving to man the position. The enemy had depth in their defensive positions, with multiple personnel assigned to each weapon system. As she continued engaging targets along the withdrawal route, Riley became aware that enemy fire was beginning to impact around their observation post. The Taliban fighters had identified the source of the precision fire that was disrupting their carefully planned ambush, and they were beginning to concentrate their efforts on eliminating the sniper team. "Riley, we've got incoming fire from multiple directions," Chun warned as bullets began striking the rocks around their position. "They've figured out where we are, and they're sending everything they've got our way." But Riley continued methodically, engaging enemy positions, knowing that every shot was buying precious time for the Marines in the valley below. Her third shot eliminated a sniper who had been engaging the Marines from a concealed position near the compound's main gate. Her fourth shot struck an RPG gunner who was preparing to engage the extraction helicopters. The radio crackled with Martinez's voice. "Overwatch, we're beginning movement to the alternate LZ. Your covering fire is giving us the opportunity we need, but we're taking casualties. We've got 3 Marines who can't move under their own power." The tactical situation had reached a critical point. The Marines were attempting to move across exposed ground while carrying wounded comrades. The extraction helicopters were taking fire as they approached the alternate landing zone, and Riley's position was under increasingly accurate enemy fire. Through her scope, Riley could see the Marines beginning their desperate dash across the open ground. carrying their wounded while under continuous fire from multiple enemy positions. Staff Sergeant Martinez was leading the formation, providing covering fire with his rifle while simultaneously coordinating the movement of his Marines. But as Riley watched the withdrawal unfold, she realized that her covering fire alone wouldn't be enough to ensure their survival. The enemy had too many positions, too much firepower, and too many fighters willing to sacrifice themselves to ensure that no American escaped the carefully prepared kill zone. The moment that would define Riley Hartwell's legacy was approaching rapidly, and she would need to make the most important shot of her life under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. The sound of incoming mortar whistled through the mountain air as the first rounds impacted near the Marines' position. The Taliban had finally brought their indirect fire assets into play, and the carefully aimed mortar rounds were walking closer to the American defensive positions with each salvo. Riley watched in horror as the third round landed directly behind the stone wall where Martinez and his Marines had taken cover. "We've got multiple casualties from the mortar strike." Martinez's voice came over the radio, now strained with pain and desperation. "Our medic is down, and we've lost our primary radio. Switching to backup comes." The explosion had not only wounded several Marines but had also destroyed their main communication link with the command post and extraction helicopters. Through her scope, Riley could see the devastating effects of the mortar barrage. Several Marines were lying motionless, while others were dragging wounded comrades to whatever cover they could find among the rubble of the compound's outer wall. The tactical situation had gone from desperate to catastrophic in a matter of seconds. "Chun, we need to do something about that mortar position," Riley said as she watched the enemy crew preparing another salvo. The mortar team had positioned themselves behind a ridge approximately 1,600 meters from her location, using the terrain to mask their position from direct fire. It was an extremely challenging shot, requiring her to account for the steep angle and the effects of the thin mountain air on bullet trajectory. Before Chun could respond, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors filled the valley as the extraction aircraft attempted to reach the alternate landing zone. But as the lead CH-46 descended toward the designated pickup site, it immediately came under heavy fire from concealed positions that hadn't been visible during the initial reconnaissance. "Cavalry 6 is taking hits," came the frantic radio call from the aircraft commander. "We've got damage to the hydraulic system and the crew chief is wounded. Aborting approach and RTB for emergency repairs." The helicopter banked sharply away from the landing zone, trailing smoke from its damaged engine compartment. Riley felt a cold dread settling in her stomach as she realized the full scope of the disaster unfolding below. The Marines were trapped, wounded, and running out of ammunition. The extraction helicopters were taking damage and might not be able to complete their mission. And enemy reinforcements were closing in from multiple directions, having detected the significant American presence in their operational area. "Overwatch, this is command," came Colonel Brennan's voice over the radio. "We need an immediate assessment of enemy strength and disposition. Higher headquarters is considering airstrikes on the compound, but we need to ensure no friendly forces are in the target area." Riley swept her scope across the battlefield, conducting a rapid tactical assessment of the situation. What she saw made her realize that airstrikes might be the only option to prevent a complete massacre, but the timing would be critical. The Marines were pinned down within 200 meters of the main enemy positions, well within the danger zone for most air-delivered ordnance. "Command, this is Overwatch," Riley transmitted. "Enemy strength estimated 80 to 100 fighters in prepared positions throughout the compound and surrounding hills. Our Marines are danger close to primary targets. Any airstrikes would need precision-guided munitions with minimal blast radius." The response came back within minutes, but it wasn't what Riley wanted to hear. "Overwatch, closest air support is still 20 minutes out." And we don't have precision munitions available for immediate tasking. We need alternative solutions. As Riley processed this information, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through her scope, she could see a large formation of Taliban fighters moving along a ridgeline approximately 3 miles to the north. The formation appeared to be at least company strength, moving in tactical formation toward the embattled compound. "Chun, look at grid 41 SQD187745, Riley said urgently. "Tell me what you see." Chun adjusted his binoculars and studied the distant ridgeline for several long seconds before responding. "Jesus Christ, Riley. That's got to be at least 150 fighters moving in our direction. They're organized, they're armed, and they'll be in position to reinforce the compound within the hour." The tactical implications were staggering. If that formation reached the battlefield, the 20 trapped Marines would be facing odds of more than 10 to 1 against a disciplined enemy force. Riley made a rapid calculation based on the enemy's movement speed and the terrain they had to cross. "We've got maybe 45 minutes before those reinforcements arrive. If we can't get our Marines out before then, this becomes a completely different kind of fight." The radio crackled with another transmission from Martinez. "Overwatch, we're down to less than 30 rounds per man, and we've got 6 Marines who can't move without assistance. The mortar fire has destroyed most of our equipment, and we're taking sniper fire from multiple positions." Riley could see the enemy snipers. Through her scope, at least 4 different positions were engaging the trapped Marines with scoped rifles. Each time one of the Americans tried to move or return fire, accurate shots would force them back into cover. It was a systematic effort to pin down the Marines until the mortar fire or reinforcements could finish them off. "I'm going to start counter-sniper operations," Riley announced to Chun. "I need you to spot for me and maintain comms with everyone else. We need to eliminate those sniper positions before they pick off our Marines one by one." The first enemy sniper was positioned in the bell tower of what appeared to be an old mosque, approximately 1,250 meters from Riley's position. Through her scope, she could see the muzzle flash each time he fired, but the shooter was well concealed. Behind the stone architecture of the tower, Riley waited patiently for the enemy sniper to present a clear target, controlling her breathing and monitoring the wind conditions that would affect her bullet's trajectory. When the Taliban shooter next exposed himself to fire at the Marines, Riley was ready. Her bullet struck him in the center of the chest, ending that particular threat. But even as she eliminated the first sniper, the others continued their deadly work. Riley could see Marines being forced to remain motionless behind inadequate cover as enemy bullets impacted all around their positions. The psychological pressure of being under continuous sniper fire was as devastating as the physical threat. It prevented the Marines from maneuvering, returning effective fire, or caring for their wounded. The second enemy sniper was positioned among rocks on a hillside approximately 900 meters from the compound. This shooter had been particularly effective, forcing the Marines to abandon several positions that might have provided better fields of fire. Riley tracked the position through her scope, waiting for the telltale muzzle flash that would reveal the exact location. When the shot came, Riley was ready with her response. Her bullet found its mark, silencing another enemy weapon. But she was becoming increasingly aware that her own position was now well known to the Taliban forces, and accurate fire was beginning to impact closer to her observation post. "Riley, we need to start thinking about displacement," Chun warned as bullets began striking the rocks around their position. "They've got our general location figured out, and it's only a matter of time before they get a direct hit." But Riley knew that abandoning their position would mean abandoning the Marines trapped in the valley below. From any other location, she wouldn't have the fields of fire necessary to provide effective support. Their observation post had been chosen specifically because it offered the best combination of concealment and tactical visibility. "We're not moving," Riley said firmly. Those Marines need us right here, right now. If we displace, they die. She continued engaging enemy positions, methodically eliminating threats while Chun coordinated with the increasingly frantic radio traffic from multiple units. The third enemy sniper was the most dangerous, positioned in a location that allowed him to engage both the trapped Marines and Riley's observation post. Through her scope, she could see him adjusting his position to get a clear shot at her location. The tactical geometry was becoming increasingly unfavorable as enemy forces maneuvered to gain advantage. Riley's shot at the third sniper was rushed due to the immediate threat he posed to her position. The bullet struck slightly low, wounding but not killing the enemy shooter. She immediately fired a follow-up shot, but by then the Taliban sniper had moved to a different position within his hide sight. "Chun, I need you to watch that position," Riley said as she reloaded her rifle. "He's wounded but still operational, and he's got our range figured out." Even as she spoke, a bullet impacted less than 2 feet from her position, sending rock fragments flying and confirming that the enemy sniper was still very much in the fight. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control. The trapped Marines were running out of ammunition and taking casualties from multiple weapon systems. The extraction helicopters were damaged and might not be able to complete their mission. Enemy reinforcements were approaching from the north, and Riley's observation post was under increasingly accurate fire. Then, Chun received a radio transmission that changed everything. "All stations, this is Thunder Base Actual. We have eyes on a large enemy formation moving to reinforce the compound. Estimate 200 to 250 fighters with heavy weapons, including what appears to be recoilless rifles and heavy machine guns. Time to target location is approximately 30 minutes. Riley felt the blood drain from her face as she processed the implications. The enemy formation Chun had spotted earlier was larger than they had estimated, and it included heavy weapons capable of destroying the extraction helicopters and overwhelming any defensive positions the Marines might establish. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted with barely controlled urgency. "The tactical situation is about to become untenable. We need immediate intervention, or we're going to lose everyone down there." Colonel Brennan's response reflected the gravity of the situation. "Overwatch? I'm authorizing danger-close airstrikes on the compound. We'll accept the risk to friendly forces rather than lose the entire element. You need to mark target locations and provide battle damage assessment." But even as Riley began identifying targets for the incoming airstrikes, she realized that conventional ordnance might not be sufficient to break the enemy's hold on the battlefield. The Taliban forces had prepared sophisticated defensive positions that could withstand significant punishment, and they had demonstrated tactical discipline that suggested professional military training. Through her scope, Riley watched as enemy fighters began repositioning their weapon systems in anticipation of airstrikes. They were spreading out their forces, moving to alternate positions, and preparing to resume operations as soon as the airstrikes concluded. The enemy clearly understood American tactical doctrine and had prepared accordingly. "Chun, even if the airstrikes are successful, we're still going to have the reinforcement column to deal with," Riley observed grimly. "And once they arrive, our Marines won't stand a chance regardless of what we do to the compound." It was at that moment that Riley noticed something that would change the entire tactical equation. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving among the enemy positions in the compound, someone who was clearly in command, directing the positioning of weapons and the movement of fighters. The individual was wearing distinctive clothing and appeared to be coordinating the entire enemy operation through hand signals and direct communication. "Chun, I think I've found their ground commander," Riley said as she studied the figure through her scope. "If I can eliminate him, it might disrupt their coordination enough to give our Marines a chance." But even as she spoke, Riley realized that the shot would be the most challenging of her career. The target was over 1,400 meters away, moving unpredictably among covered positions and protected by multiple layers of security. The wind conditions were variable due to the mountain terrain, and her position was under increasing fire from enemy weapons. The decision she was about to make would determine whether 20 Marines lived or died, and whether the approaching enemy reinforcements would face organized resistance or complete chaos when they arrived at the battlefield. The distinctive whine of incoming artillery shells pierced the mountain air as the Taliban forces unleashed their heaviest weapons on the trapped Marines. Riley watched in horror as 122mm rockets from Soviet-era BN-21 launchers began impacting around the compound, sending massive plumes of debris and smoke into the sky. The enemy had revealed their ace card, a rocket artillery battery that had remained hidden throughout the engagement. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun shouted into his radio over the deafening explosions. "The enemy has rocket artillery, Grid 41 SQD 192738. Our Marines are taking direct hits from multiple rocket launchers." The tactical situation had moved beyond desperate into the realm of complete catastrophe. Through her scope, Riley could see the devastating effects of the rocket barrage. The stone wall that had provided the Marines' primary cover was being systematically destroyed, and she could see several motionless figures among the rubble. Staff Sergeant Martinez was still moving, dragging wounded Marines to whatever shelter remained, but his radio calls had stopped coming through clearly due to the continuous explosions. "Riley, look at the ridge to the east," Chun said urgently, pointing toward a formation of vehicles moving along a distant mountain road. "That's not just infantry reinforcements. They've got technical vehicles, possibly armor, and what looks like more artillery pieces." Riley shifted her scope to study the approaching convoy and felt her heart sink. The enemy formation included at least 12 vehicles, including several that appeared to be carrying heavy weapons. Among them, she could identify what looked like a T-55 tank and multiple vehicles mounting heavy machine guns and recoilless rifles. The tactical mathematics were becoming impossibly stark. Even if the 20 Marines in the compound could somehow survive the current bombardment, they would soon be facing a mechanized enemy force that outnumbered them by more than 15 to 1. The extraction helicopters were damaged and unable to approach the battlefield, and the nearest American reinforcements were over an hour away. "Command, this is Overwatch," Riley transmitted with controlled urgency. "Enemy mechanized reinforcements approaching from the east. Estimate arrival time 15 minutes. Current Marine position will be completely untenable upon enemy arrival." Colonel Brennan's response reflected the gravity of the situation. "Overwatch, I'm scrambling every available asset, but our closest air support is still 12 minutes out. You need to buy us time however you can." Riley continued studying the enemy commander through her scope, tracking his movements as he coordinated the increasingly sophisticated attack on the Marine positions. The individual was clearly a professional military officer, directing the placement of heavy weapons and the coordination between different enemy units with tactical precision that spoke of formal training. "Chun, that commander isn't just Taliban," Riley observed as she watched the figure directing the rocket artillery strikes. "Look at how he's coordinating between the artillery, the infantry, and the approaching mechanized units. That's Soviet doctrine, executed perfectly." Chun focused his binoculars on the same area and nodded grimly. "You're right. That's either a former Afghan army officer or possibly a foreign advisor. Either way, he's the reason this ambush has been so effective. Remove him, and their coordination falls apart." But the shot Riley was contemplating would push her skills beyond anything she had ever attempted. The range was 1,847 meters, nearly 200 meters, beyond her rifle's optimal engagement envelope. The target was moving unpredictably between covered positions, and the mountain winds were creating variable conditions that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict. More critically, enemy fire was now impacting directly on Riley's position with increasing accuracy. The Taliban forces had not only identified her general location, but were beginning to bracket her exact position with concentrated fire from multiple weapons. Every few seconds, bullets were striking within inches of her shooting position. "Riley, we can't stay here much longer," Chun warned as a burst of automatic weapons fire-chipped rock fragments from the boulder protecting them. "They've got our exact position, and they're going to get a direct hit soon." Riley knew Chun was right, but she also understood that abandoning their position would doom the Marines in the valley below. From any other location, she wouldn't have the angle or range necessary to engage the enemy commander. This was their only shot, literally and figuratively. "I need 2 minutes," Riley said as she began making detailed calculations for what would be the most important shot of her life. "Watch for muzzle flashes and call out any immediate threats, but give me 2 minutes to work this solution." Riley began the complex process of calculating every variable that would affect her bullet's 1,847-meter journey to the target. The elevation difference between her position and the target was approximately 400 feet, requiring significant compensation for the steep downward angle. The mountain air was thin, which would affect bullet performance differently than sea-level conditions. Most challenging were the wind conditions. The mountain terrain created unpredictable air currents that varied significantly between Riley's position and the target area. She could see dust and debris being blown in different directions at various points along the bullet's projected path, indicating complex wind patterns that would require educated guesswork rather than precise calculation. "Wind reading at our position is 8 miles per hour from the northwest," Shun reported while maintaining his watch for immediate threats. "But I can see different wind indicators at various points between here and the target. You're going to have to estimate the average effect." Riley had trained for this moment her entire career, but no amount of training could fully prepare someone for the pressure of making a shot that would determine whether dozens of Marines lived or died. She thought briefly of her grandfather's words about the importance of everything that happened before pulling the trigger, the preparation, the patience, and the ability to block out everything except what mattered most. Through her scope, Riley could see the enemy commander pausing near a radio operator, apparently receiving reports about the approaching mechanized reinforcements. It was the first time he had remained stationary for more than a few seconds, and Riley realized this might be her only opportunity for a clear shot. Range 1,847 meters, wind estimation 6 miles per hour with variable gusts. Downward angle approximately 15 degrees, Riley whispered to herself as she made her final adjustments. The target is stationary but likely to move within seconds. The moment of truth had arrived. Riley controlled her breathing using the techniques her grandfather had taught her in the Nebraska cornfields, settling into the same mental state that had carried her through countless training exercises and previous combat engagements. But this shot was different. This shot would either save the lives of her fellow Marines or fail to prevent a massacre. As Riley prepared to fire, the sounds of battle seemed to fade into the background. The explosions, the gunfire, and the radio chatter all became distant noise as she focused entirely on the sight picture in her scope. The enemy commander was clearly visible, standing near the radio operator while pointing toward the Marine. Positions. Riley squeezed the trigger with the same smooth, controlled motion she had practiced thousands of times, sending the .338 Lapua Magnum bullet on its nearly 2-second journey across the battlefield. The recoil of her rifle was familiar and comfortable, but the wait for impact seemed to stretch for an eternity. At 1,847 meters, the bullet struck the enemy commander center mass, dropping him instantly and sending the radio operator diving for cover. The effect on the enemy forces was immediate and dramatic. The coordinated rocket artillery fire ceased abruptly, and Riley could see confusion spreading among the Taliban positions as subordinate commanders tried to understand what had happened to their leader. "Holy shit, Riley!" Chun exclaimed as he watched the enemy reaction through his binoculars. "You got him. The whole enemy position is falling apart." The death of their commander had indeed created chaos among the Taliban forces. Without his coordination, the different enemy units began operating independently, and their tactical effectiveness dropped dramatically. The rocket artillery fell silent as the crew apparently waited for new targeting instructions that would never come. But Riley's celebration was short-lived as she realized that her muzzle flash and the crack of her rifle had revealed their exact position to every enemy fighter in the valley. Within seconds, concentrated fire from multiple weapons began impacting their observation posts with deadly accuracy. "We need to move now," Shun shouted as bullets began striking all around their position. "They know exactly where we are, and they're bringing everything they've got." Riley began rapidly packing her rifle system while Chun coordinated their displacement to an alternate position. But even as they prepared to move, she could see that her shot had created the opportunity the trapped Marines needed. Without coordinated enemy fire, Martinez and his surviving Marines were beginning to move toward the alternate extraction site. The radio crackled with Martinez's voice. "Now clear and strong. Overwatch, whatever you just did worked. Enemy fire has decreased significantly, and we're beginning movement to the alternate LZ. We've got 8 Marines who can move under their own power and 4 who need assistance." Riley felt a surge of satisfaction knowing that her shot had given the Marines the chance they needed, but the tactical situation remained extremely dangerous. The enemy mechanized reinforcements were still approaching, and once they arrived, they would have the firepower to overwhelm any defensive positions regardless of leadership coordination. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted as they prepared to displace. "The enemy commander has been eliminated, and the Marine ground element is moving to alternate LZ, but mechanized reinforcements are still approaching and will arrive within 10 minutes. Colonel Brennan's response carried a note of hope that hadn't been present in previous transmissions. "Overwatch, air support is now 5 minutes out with precision-guided munitions. Your elimination of the enemy commander has bought us the time we needed. Maintain Overwatch on the extraction site." As Riley and Chun moved to their alternate position under heavy enemy fire, she could see the extraction helicopters approaching from the south. The damaged CH-46 had been replaced by a CH-53 Super Stallion, and 2 AH-1 Cobra attack helicopters were providing escort and fire support. The sight of American aircraft approaching the battlefield seemed to energize the surviving Marines, who increased their pace toward the extraction site, despite their wounds and exhaustion. Martinez had organized his Marines into a tactical formation that allowed them to provide mutual support while moving the wounded to safety. But the enemy mechanized reinforcements had also spotted the approaching helicopters and were accelerating their movement toward the battlefield. Riley could see the lead vehicles racing along a mountain road, trying to reach positions where they could engage the extraction aircraft with their heavy weapons. "Chun, we need to engage those lead vehicles," Riley said as she set up her rifle in the new position. "If they get into position to engage our helicopters, this whole extraction falls apart." The range to the approaching enemy vehicles was over 1,200 meters, and they were moving at high speed along a winding mountain road. Riley would have to lead the target significantly and quotantly and account for their changing elevation as they navigated the terrain. Her first shot struck the windshield of the lead technical vehicle, causing it to swerve off the road and roll down the mountainside. The second vehicle in the convoy immediately stopped and began deploying its mounted heavy machine gun. But Riley's follow-up shot eliminated the gunner. Before he could bring effective fire on the extraction helicopters, The helicopter assault was now in full swing, with the Cobra gunships engaging enemy positions throughout the compound while the transport helicopter descended toward the alternate landing zone. Riley could see Marines running across the open ground toward the aircraft, carrying their wounded comrades while the aircrew provided covering fire with door-mounted machine guns. As the first Marines reached the helicopter and began loading the wounded aboard, Riley realized that her impossible shot had accomplished something far greater than eliminating a single enemy commander. By disrupting the Taliban's coordination at the critical moment, she had created the opportunity for a successful extraction that would save not just 20 Marines, but potentially hundreds more who would have died in follow-on operations to recover or avenge the lost unit. The enemy reinforcements were still approaching, but without their original commander's tactical coordination, they were arriving piecemeal and failing to mass their combat power effectively. The American air support was systematically destroying the most dangerous enemy assets, and the extraction was proceeding according to plan. But Riley's work wasn't finished yet. The extraction helicopter was still vulnerable during the loading process, and enemy forces throughout the valley were still trying to bring effective fire on the aircraft and the Marines. The roar of the CH-53 Super Stallion's engines filled the valley as the massive helicopter struggled to gain altitude with its full load of wounded Marines. Riley watched through her scope as the aircraft cleared the ridgeline, finally escaping the kill zone that had claimed so many lives. But even as the extraction succeeded, the battle for the valley was far from over. Enemy forces were still streaming toward the compound from multiple directions, and Riley could see that some of the Taliban fighters were attempting to set up positions that could threaten future American operations in the region. The death of their commander had disrupted their immediate tactical coordination, but it hadn't eliminated their will to fight. "Chun, look at grid 41 SQD 201747, Riley said, directing her partner's attention to a hilltop where enemy fighters were establishing what appeared to be a heavy weapons position. They're setting up what looks like a recoilless rifle. If they get that operational, they can threaten any aircraft trying to use this valley." Chun studied the position through his binoculars and confirmed Riley's assessment. "That's definitely a 107mm recoilless rifle, probably Chinese-made. From that position, they have clear fields of fire on the entire valley floor and most of the approach routes." The tactical implications were significant. Even though the immediate crisis had passed, the enemy was adapting to their losses and establishing new positions that could threaten future operations. Riley realized that her mission wasn't complete. She needed to continue disrupting enemy operations to prevent them from regaining their tactical advantage. The range to the recoilless rifle position was 1,320 meters, challenging but well within Riley's capabilities. More importantly, the crew was focused on setting up their weapon and wasn't expecting precision fire from such an extreme range. Riley had the element of surprise, but only for a few more seconds. Her shot struck the weapon's gunner just as he was preparing to load the first round, eliminating the immediate threat and sending the rest of the crew scrambling for cover. But Riley's success had once again revealed her position, and enemy forces throughout the valley began directing fire toward her observation post. "Riley, we've got vehicles moving up that road to our west," Chun warned, pointing toward a convoy of technical vehicles that was attempting to flank their position. "They're trying to get close enough to overrun us with direct assault." Riley could see the convoy through her scope, 4 vehicles carrying what appeared to be at least 20 fighters moving rapidly along a mountain road that would bring them within 300 meters of her position. At that range, the enemy fighters could assault her observation post with small arms and grenades, forcing her to abandon the high ground that gave her tactical advantage. "We need to thin them out before they get too close," Riley said as she began engaging the lead vehicle. Her first shot struck the driver, causing the technical to veer off the road and crash into a boulder. The second vehicle immediately stopped and began deploying its passengers. But Riley's follow-up shots prevented them from establishing effective fighting positions. The engagement was developing into a running gun battle, as enemy forces attempted to close the distance while Riley and Chun provided precision fire from their elevated position. Chun was now actively engaging targets with his rifle, while maintaining communication with the Tactical Operations Center and calling in coordinates for the incoming air support. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted between engagements. "We're heavily engaged with enemy forces attempting to overrun our position. We need immediate close air support at our location." The response came back within seconds. "Overwatch, Harrier flight is inbound your position, ETA 3 minutes. Mark targets with smoke if possible." But Riley and Chun didn't have smoke grenades. Their mission had been planned as a reconnaissance. An Overwatch operation, not a direct combat engagement. They would have to guide the aircraft onto targets using radio communication and precise grid coordinates, a more challenging process that required perfect timing and clear communication. As the sound of approaching jet engines filled the valley, Riley could see additional enemy reinforcements arriving from the north. The Taliban forces were committing significant resources to eliminating the sniper team that had disrupted their carefully planned ambush, and they were willing to accept heavy casualties to achieve that objective. "Chun, mark grid 41 SQD 198735. For immediate airstrike," Riley called out as she identified a concentration of enemy vehicles that had stopped to deploy their fighters. Multiple technical vehicles with heavy weapons, approximately 15 personnel. The lead AV-8B Harrier rolled in on its attack run, its 25mm cannon sending a stream of high explosive rounds into the enemy position. The effect was devastating. Vehicles exploded in balls of flame, and enemy fighters who had been advancing toward Riley's position were forced to seek cover or retreat. But the airstrikes also revealed the true scope of the enemy presence in the valley. As smoke and dust cleared from the bombing runs, Riley could see enemy positions that had remained hidden throughout the engagement. The Taliban forces had established a sophisticated network of fighting positions, weapons caches, and communication sites throughout the area. "Jesus, Riley," Chun said as he studied the valley through his binoculars. "This wasn't just an ambush site. This was a major staging area for Taliban operations. Look at all those positions that are just now becoming visible." Riley swept her scope across the battlefield and realized that Chun was right. The compound they had originally targeted was just one part of a much larger enemy complex that included underground bunkers, concealed weapons positions, and what appeared to be a significant logistics operation. "Command, this is Overwatch," Riley transmitted with growing excitement. "We've uncovered what appears to be a major enemy base complex. Grid 41 SQD 195740 through 41 SQD 205750. Multiple hardened positions, vehicle parks, and what looks like ammunition storage areas." The response from Colonel Brennan reflected the significance of the discovery. "Overwatch, maintain observation and provide targeting data. We're retasking additional air assets to your location. This could be the intelligence breakthrough we've been looking for." Over the next hour, Riley and Chun directed airstrikes against more than 30 separate enemy positions throughout the valley complex. Each bombing run revealed additional targets as secondary explosions indicated ammunition storage sites and fuel depots that the Taliban had carefully concealed throughout the mountainous terrain. The precision of Riley's targeting information allowed the aircraft to destroy enemy assets with minimal ordnance expenditure while avoiding civilian structures in the nearby village. Her ability to distinguish between legitimate military targets and protected sites was crucial in preventing collateral damage that could have undermined American efforts to win local support. "Overwatch, this is Thunder 6, came a new voice on the radio. Brigadier General Robert Hayes was the regional commander. and his personal involvement indicated the strategic importance of the intelligence Riley had uncovered. Your discovery and targeting of this enemy complex represents the most significant intelligence coup in this sector in over 2 years. As the airstrikes continued, Riley began to understand the broader implications of what had started as a failed helicopter assault. The Taliban had been using the valley as a major staging area for operations throughout the province, and the loss of this base would significantly disrupt their ability to conduct large-scale attacks against American forces. "Chun, look at that road network," Riley observed as she studied the valley through her scope. This complex was designed to support operations throughout the entire region. They've got vehicle routes leading to at least 6 different provinces. The intelligence value of the discovery extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The captured enemy documents and equipment would provide information about Taliban supply networks, command structures, and operational planning that could benefit American operations throughout Afghanistan. But the most significant aspect of the engagement was the demonstration of how a single well-trained sniper could influence strategic outcomes through tactical actions. Riley's elimination of the enemy commander had not only saved the lives of 20 Marines but had also led to the discovery and destruction of a major enemy complex. As the sun began to set over the mountains, Riley and Chun prepared to exfiltrate from their observation post. The valley below them was now largely silent, with burning vehicles and structures marking the locations where enemy positions had been destroyed by precision airstrikes. "Command, this is Overwatch," Chun transmitted as they prepared to leave. "Enemy complex has been neutralized. No further activity observed in the valley. Request extraction to friendly lines." The helicopter that arrived to extract Riley and Chun was piloted by the same crew that had conducted the successful evacuation of the wounded Marines earlier in the day. As they lifted off from the battlefield, Riley could see the full scope of the destruction that had resulted from her single shot. "Ma'am, I wanted to personally thank you," said Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the helicopter pilot. "Those Marines you saved today, 3 of them are from my hometown. Their families will never know how close they came to losing their sons, but I'll never forget what you did." During the flight back to Forward Operating Base Sentinel, Riley reflected on the events of the day and the chain of consequences that had resulted from her decision to take an extremely difficult shot under impossible circumstances. What had started as a desperate attempt to save 20 Marines had evolved into a strategic victory that would impact operations throughout the region. Intelligence gathered from the destroyed enemy complex led to follow-up operations that disrupted Taliban activities across 3 provinces. The loss of their regional command center forced enemy forces to reorganize their entire operational structure, creating opportunities for American forces to gain tactical and strategic advantages. Back at base, Riley was met by Colonel Brennan, who had flown in specifically to debrief her on the engagement. "Sergeant Hartwell, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I've never seen a single shot have such far-reaching consequences. Your actions today saved lives, destroyed a major enemy complex, and provided intelligence that will benefit operations for months to come." But for Riley, the most important outcome was simpler and more personal. Staff Sergeant Martinez and his Marines had survived their ordeal, and they would be returning home to their families instead of being shipped back in flag-draped coffins. The wounded Marines were receiving medical care and would recover from their injuries. News of Riley's shot began to spread throughout the military community with remarkable speed. The story of the farm girl from Nebraska who had made an impossible shot to save her fellow Marines became legend in the halls of Quantico and throughout the sniper community. Chief Warrant Officer Sanderson, Riley's former instructor at Scout Sniper School, called her personally to congratulate her on the engagement. "Riley, when I first met you at Quantico, I knew you had exceptional potential. But what you accomplished today goes beyond anything we could have taught you in school. You've proven that the human element is still the most important factor in warfare. The technical aspects of Riley's shot were analyzed and studied by military marksmen throughout the world. The 1,847-meter engagement under combat conditions became a case study in precision shooting, with experts noting the numerous variables that made the shot nearly impossible and the tactical decision-making that led to its success. But Riley understood that the shot itself was only one element of a much larger story. Her success had been built on years of training, the wisdom passed down by her grandfather, the support of her spotter and fellow Marines, and the institutional knowledge of the United States Marine Corps. 3 months after the engagement, Riley received notification that she was being awarded the Navy Cross for her actions in the Valley. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy." While serving as a sniper with Marine Forces Afghanistan, Sergeant Hartwell's exceptional marksmanship and tactical decision-making under extreme combat conditions resulted in the elimination of enemy leadership, the successful extraction of 20 Marines, and the discovery of a major enemy complex. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, the Marine Corps, and the United States Naval Service. The medal ceremony was attended by many of the Marines whose lives Riley had saved, including Staff Sergeant Martinez, who had recovered from his wounds and returned to active duty. During his speech at the ceremony, Martinez captured the sentiment felt by everyone who had been in the Valley that day. "Sergeant Hartwell didn't just save our lives. She proved that when Marines are in trouble, other Marines will do whatever it takes to bring them home." Riley's story became more than just an account of exceptional marksmanship. It became a testament to the values and training that define the United States Marine Corps. Her willingness to risk her own life to save her fellow Marines exemplified the brotherhood that makes Marines willing to fight and die for each other. Years later, when Riley returned to Nebraska to visit her grandfather's grave, she carried with her the same small container of soil that had accompanied her to Afghanistan. But now it held additional meaning. It represented not just where she had come from, but the values and principles that had guided her through the most challenging moment of her life. The farm girl who had learned to shoot in the cornfields of Nebraska had become one of the most decorated snipers in Marine Corps history. But more importantly, she had proven that in the most desperate moments, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage. The shot that saved 200 Marines had been fired by someone who never forgot that her mission was to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And in doing so, Riley Hartwell had earned her place among the legends of American military history. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.